Welcome to a new daily top Askreddit video. Today's topic: what the scariest true story you know. The story of the Lake Yos disaster. The lake periodically belches a cloud of invisible carbon dioxide gas that suffocates everything within a 16-mile radius. In 1986, over 1,700 people and all their livestock died without even understanding what was happening to them. I could not speak. I became unconscious. I could not open my mouth because then I smelled something terrible. I heard my daughter snoring in a terrible way, very abnormal. When crossing to my daughter's bed, I collapsed and fell. I was there till 9 o'clock in the morning of Friday, the next day, until a friend of mine came and knocked at my door. I was surprised to see that my trousers were red, had some stains like honey. I saw some starchy mess on my body. My arms had some wounds. I didn't really know how I got these wounds. I opened the door. I wanted to speak, my breath would not come out. My daughter was already dead. I went into my daughter's bed, thinking that she was still sleeping. I slept till it was 4:30 in the afternoon on Friday, the same day. Then, I managed to go over to my neighbors' houses. They were all dead. I decided to leave. Because, most of my family was in one. I got my motorcycle. A friend whose father had died left with me, for one. As I rode through Yos I didn't see any sign of any living thing. When I got to one, I was unable to walk, even to talk my body was completely weak. Jesus, this is terrifying. I saw an interview of one of the first people at the scene afterwards. He said it was very still and quiet because even the insects were all killed. A lesser-known fact. Even though many people died in this situation, it led scientists to discover another lake with almost the exact same situation occurring. The difference was that the other lake was near a relatively large city. A CO2 bubble forming at the bottom of the lake would have almost certainly been burst by an earthquake. Thankfully, since scientists were able to find it quick enough, they created a system that could slowly vent that CO2 and prevent many more people from dying. This whole thing is so eerie. One of the scarier things I've ever read about. The Nutty Putty Cave Incident. A spelunker got stuck upside down in a narrow cave for 26 hours. Crews tried to pull him out with pulleys, but had to be careful not to break his legs, because that could be fatal with the circumstances he was in. Rescuers even almost dislodged him, only for an anchor to fail at the last second, plunging him back into the crevice. He eventually died, and they sealed the cave shut with him inside. I read about this a few weeks ago. I had heart palpitations just thinking about being stuck in that hole. Just scary as hell. Thinking about it now makes my hands sweaty. I never understood the fascination with diving into such tight and dangerous spaces. In the 80s there was a Mexican cult led by an American named Adolfo Costazo. They used to kidnap random people from tourist towns and nearby cities and perform human sacrifice on them in their rural Mexican desert compound, usually torturing in elaborate rituals for hours or days before finally letting them die. These rituals included vivisections, castrations, eyeball removal, tongue removal, teeth pulling, skin flaying, hanging, etc. They used amphetamines and cocaine to force the victim to stay awake during the torture and not pass out from shock. The cult believed the more pain and fear they could generate in the sacrifice victim, the more powerful the body parts would be as ritual trinkets and also for food for the cult's gaga, which is a large ritual cauldron used to store bones, blood, meat, and other valuable items that the cult believed gave them power. They used to make staves out of wired together spinal columns, and they would often eat the victim's eyeballs during the rituals. They are believed to have kidnapped and sacrificed over 26 people to their gaga in their 3 years that they were active from 1986 to 1989. The leader committed suicide when the police showed up at their compound. They arrested 14 cult members, but most people believe there were at least a dozen more that escaped and are still out there. Yo, what the fuck? There was a cartel that kidnapped entire buses and made the people fight to the death. I've told this story before. I'm an eye doctor and I had a patient come to me with an infected eyelid. 2 other eye doctors tried to treat and failed. They were dumping all sorts of medicine into it and it wasn't getting any better. At this point, it was swollen and painful for weeks with no improvement despite being on tons of meds. Apparently, neither of them thought to flip the lid upside down, you know that gross trick some kids do with their upper eyelids. It was a painful maneuver for her very swollen eyelid, which might explain it. Anyhow, there appeared to be what looked like a visible abscess inside the tissue with thick gooey material. I thought I'd give it a nudge and saw it move. This wasn't an abscess, it was something else. I managed to remove it quite easily in one whole piece. It was a fly larva. The patient told me that she had a bug hit her in the eye a few days before she got this infection. I removed the larva and within 2 days the wound closed and she was 100% recovered on basic antibiotic eye drops. Yes, I do have the photos from this case for those interested. TLDR, patient had a bug lay an egg in her eyelid and I removed the larva. Wow, that's truly gross but good for you and the patient for doing common sense checking to find the obstruction. /r/make a mess of her. A guy in a sinking ship found an oxygen bubble and only drank a sip of Diet Coke every 7 hours. He was rescued after 60 hours after being under constant danger from drowning and even sharks. Sharks are notoriously fans of Pepsi. They saw the diet and left him alone. His name is Harrison Oki, you can watch his rescue video here. Edit, my first award, ever. Thank you so much. My favorite part of this, besides the guy being rescued from a horrible death, is how startled the diver was and how the guy running the support team was like fuck, now what? I've heard about this one. After his rescue didn't he need to sit in isolation for a few days as pressure was released? Yep. Being that deep for so long would have caused the bends and killed him if he ascended too quickly, so I think he was put in a decompression chamber for 2 or 3 days. The story of Kloss is terrifying. In rural Wisconsin last year, a 13 to 14-ish-year-old girl went missing after her parents were murdered in their home. Police arrived within 4 minutes or so, but she is just gone. Of course, speculation is that she was kidnapped, or that she was in on it, or dead, or whatever. Nobody knows because she has completely vanished. 88 days later, in the dead of a northern Wisconsin winter, she runs out into the street to a woman walking her dog. She had been held captive about 40 minutes from her home. All of that is scary enough, but here's the terrifying part. She had never had any contact with the guy that murdered her family and abducted her. One day he was driving to a new job, at which he only lasted a day, and saw her get on the school bus. At that moment he decided that he was going to take her. There was no warning. No grooming. There was absolutely nothing that she or her family could have done to avoid everything. A creepy young man saw her from 100 away and decided that he would murder her family and take her for himself. I got to say that I was completely shocked when they announced when they found her. I thought for sure she was dead. Also from WI, totally agree. Thought they would find her body sometime in the spring. James is my cousin. Of course no one wants to assume the worst, but by the time she had managed to escape, we had all pretty much assumed she was dead. The emotional rollercoaster of finding her alive after my aunt and uncle had been killed like that was insane. It was just crazy seeing the story in all of these magazines, having classmates talking to me about her without realizing my connection, seeing America grieve with my family over this tragedy, etc. For the longest time I didn't allow myself to feel anything because I had the mentality I was too far removed as a cousin who had only met them a couple times, and closer family and friends had it worse than me. Then to see other people who didn't even know them crying was just weird. It almost made me mad. Now I'm getting to a better point with grieving and can appreciate the entire community coming together and stuff, but I'm still emotionally confused about the whole situation. Edit, holy shit you guys, I don't know what to say. I've really only told one close friend about these thoughts and was so scared to show them to the world, but you guys are amazing. I called my mom and we cried about everything and she really pushed me to start up therapy again, so I'm planning on making an appointment this week. Thanks again, I just really needed the support and validation that it's okay to be emotionally confused with a situation like this. Also the initial responding police drove right past the abductor, driving her away from her house. They missed her by minutes. Close calls like this always kill me. This, Angela Hammond, J.C. Lee Dugard, and other cases like them are the ones that stick out to me as being especially harrowing. I can't imagine how helpless and guilt-ridden those people who saw them last must be. It's so awful. Edit, grammar and clarity. I remember reading ages ago about a guy who was in the military. He got back home after a tour of duty to find his wife and 2 kids dead. They lived in a remote location. Turned out the mom had a sudden heart attack or stroke or something, and the 2 little kids had died of starvation or dehydration as they were too young to care for themselves. Not exactly a ghost story, but as a parent that scares the shit out of me. Reminds me of a story. Dad, Mom and 3 kids decide they want to spend a weekend away at their cabin, but Dad has to work on Friday. They decide Mom and kids will go on ahead without him and he will meet them at the cabin Saturday morning. Gigantic storm rolls through and suddenly a fucking tornado touches down. It destroys part of town, including the neighborhood where the family lives. Dad is a firefighter, so they are swamped with rescues, but Dad is happy his family is safe at the cabin. His truck finish their active calls and decide to take a drive around town to look for anyone needed help and see all the damage, and they drive down the family's street. The house is half destroyed, but more importantly, Dad spots Mom's car in the driveway. Mom and all 3 kids died because they had decided to wait for Dad as a surprise. There was over 25 deaths in total from the tornado. Dad ended up committing suicide a year or so later. The story was told to my dad when he went through first responder counseling by the firefighter Dad's old co-worker. I can't fucking imagine. Thinking the whole time your family is safe, only to find out they stayed behind for you to surprise you. And died. I wouldn't last a year. Oh, I've heard that once she was a diabetic and fell into a coma and died. That's actually why there's very strict rules in the military about checking on spouses with medical problems. IRC. My husband worked a case similar to this. Lady left her 2 grandkids she had custody of with her morbidly obese husband who had heart problems while she was out of town for a long time. I don't remember all the details, it was a while ago. Anyway, guy had a heart attack first night and died. Kids were 4 and 1 and couldn't undo the lock of the room they were in, but luckily the guy had snacks and soda in there and the 4-year-old managed to get some open for him and the baby so they didn't die, but they were there with a rotting obese body for a week before the lady thought to try and check on them. Poor kids. How does something like this happen? Like, she thought this was a good idea. She didn't call to check on them for a full week. I don't know the case obviously, but it sounds negligent. Those poor little kids.